New York City, penthouse of the Plaza Hotel. The golden champagne sparkled under the crystal chandelier lights, and Marina Santos adjusted her borrowed black dress for the third time in 5 minutes. She definitely didn't belong at this charity gala where a single canapé cost more than her weekly salary as a freelance journalist. "Relax, Mari," whispered Camila, pulling her by the arm. "You look gorgeous, and this is our chance to get that exclusive interview with the CEO of Petrovisk Industries." Marina rolled her eyes. "Cam, I don't even know what he looks like. I just know he's more closed off than Fort Knox and hates journalists." Exactly. Imagine the headline: Brazilian journalist breaks through the country's most mysterious magnate's defenses. At that moment, a tall man in an impeccable suit and military posture crossed the ballroom. Perfectly aligned black hair, defined jawline, and an expression that could freeze fire. He was clearly irritated, speaking on the phone in English with an accent Marina couldn't identify. "No, Victor. I said I don't want photographers here. Yes, I know it's for charity, but—" Marina didn't hear the rest. Her attention was captured by a group of socialites whispering maliciously while watching a younger girl, obviously out of place, spill champagne on her own purse. "Look at that, everyone," said a blonde with red nails. "Who brought this creature here? Clearly doesn't even know how to hold a glass." The girl, who couldn't be more than 19, was red with embarrassment, trying to clean up the mess with paper napkins. Marina felt her blood boil. She had grown up being the weird one at the private school where she studied on scholarship, and she knew that look of superiority well. "Excuse me," said Marina, approaching the group. "I think you're confusing charity with cruelty." The blonde turned with a venomous smile. "Sorry, darling, but you are? Someone who doesn't need to humiliate children to feel important." "Children?" The woman gave a shrill laugh. "She's old enough to know she shouldn't be here. And you're old enough to have manners, but clearly that didn't work out." The entire group turned to Marina, who felt all conversations around them stop, including that of the mysterious man on the phone. "How dare you!" exclaimed another socialite. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "Someone who desperately needs a better hobby," Marina replied, putting her arm protectively around the girl. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's find people who deserve our company." But the blonde wasn't finished. Typical nouveau riche. I bet she doesn't even have her own invitation. Marina stopped. That went too far. "You know what?" she said, turning slowly. "You're right. I don't belong in this world of plastic and futility, but at least I have something your money will never buy." "What would that be?" "Decency." The woman went livid. "You have no idea who I am. My husband—" "Your husband what?" Marina took 2 steps forward. "Is going to sue me for having my own opinion." That's when she felt an imposing presence behind her. A deep voice with a slightly British accent cut through the air like a blade. "Is there a problem here?" Marina turned and met the most penetrating eyes she'd ever seen in her life. Gray-green like the sea before a storm. The man from the phone was now beside her, and she could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something more masculine and dangerous. "There's no problem at all," said the blonde, suddenly nervous. "We were just being absolutely charming, as always," he completed, and there was enough ice in his voice to cool the entire penthouse. Marina looked at him, then at the women who suddenly seemed to want to disappear, and made an impulsive decision that would change her life forever. "You know what?" she said loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "I don't need to defend myself to people like this. I have better things to do." And before she could think about what she was doing, Marina grabbed the stranger by the lapels of his jacket and kissed him. It was a firm, determined kiss that lasted exactly 5 seconds, enough time for the entire ballroom to fall into absolute silence. When she pulled away, the man looked at her with an indescribable expression. "Thanks for the support," whispered Marina, still with her hands on his chest. "Sometimes you need to make a statement." And she left there as if she owned the place, leaving behind an entire ballroom of open mouths and a man who, for the first time in years, didn't know exactly what to say. Camila caught up with her at the elevator, breathless. "Mari!" Have you completely lost your mind? Probably, Marina replied, pressing the ground floor button. But it was worth every second. Do you know who you just kissed? A polite guy who defended me? Marina. Camila swallowed hard. That was Alexander Petrovisk, the CEO of Petrovisk Industries, the most powerful man in America. The elevator stopped and Marina felt her stomach drop along with it. What? And worse yet, Camila continued, pulling out her phone. There are already 3 different videos of your kiss on Instagram. You just went viral kissing the most inaccessible man in the country. Marina looked at her reflection in the elevator mirror. Her lips still tasted of danger and infinite possibilities. Damn, she murmured. Upstairs, Alexander Petrovisk was still standing in the same spot, his fingers unconsciously touching his lips. Beside him, his assistant Victor cleared his throat nervously. Sir, the press is already calling. What should I say? Alexander finally moved, adjusting his jacket with the military precision that characterized him. Find out everything about her, he said, his voice lower than normal. Name, address, history, family, everything. Sir, and Victor? Alexander turned to his assistant, and for the first time in years there was something that could be mistaken for a smile on his lips. Cancel my agenda for tomorrow. I have a journalist to meet. Marina's apartment, Brooklyn, New York. Marina woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing like an angry hornet. She'd managed exactly 3 hours of sleep after lying awake replaying the kiss that had apparently broken the internet. Her modest 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn felt even smaller with the weight of her impulsive decision pressing down on her. 37 missed calls, she mumbled, scrolling through her phone. 18 from unknown numbers, 12 from Camila, and… Her blood ran cold. 7 from Vogue magazine? She stumbled to the kitchen, desperately needing coffee, when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw a man in an expensive suit holding a massive bouquet of white orchids. Marina Santos? His voice was crisp, professional, with a slight Eastern European accent. Depends who's asking, she replied, not opening the door. I'm Victor Kozlov, representing Mr. Alexander Petrovisk. He'd like to arrange a meeting. Marina's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. A meeting? At his earliest convenience. Which would be now. Now, it's 7 a.m. Mr. Petrovisk is an early riser. He's waiting downstairs in his car. Marina peered through the window and saw a sleek black Tesla parked below, tinted windows hiding its occupant. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was already on her fire escape, openly staring while watering her plants. Tell him I'm not dressed for meetings. He anticipated that. There's a selection of appropriate attire in the car. Marina blinked. I'm sorry, what? Size 8, correct? Mr. Petrovisk is very thorough. How does he know my… Marina stopped herself. Never mind. I don't want to know. 20 minutes later, Marina found herself in the back of the most luxurious car she'd ever seen, wearing a perfectly fitted navy dress that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Alexander sat across from her, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread, completely unbothered by the early hour. Good morning, Miss Santos, he said, his voice as smooth as aged whiskey. I hope you slept well. Like a baby, Marina lied, clutching her purse. You know, the kind that cries every hour. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. Honesty, I appreciate that. Great. Then honestly, why am I here? Are you going to sue me? Have me arrested for public indecency? Sue you? Alexander leaned forward slightly, and Marina caught a whiff of his cologne again. Miss Santos, that kiss was the most genuine human interaction I've had in years. Marina stared at him. You're joking. I don't joke about business. And this is business? Everything is business. He handed her a tablet. These are the headlines from this morning. Marina's eyes widened as she scrolled through the news articles. Mystery woman kisses billionaire CEO at charity gala. The kiss that broke the internet. Who is Marina Santos? Petrovisk Industries stock rises 3% after CEO's public romance. "Oh my gosh," Marina whispered. "I made your stock go up?" Apparently, the market finds the idea of me having a personal life appealing. But you don't actually have a personal life. Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No, I don't. The car pulled up to a sleek Manhattan office building, and Marina realized they were at Petrovisk Industries headquarters. The lobby was all glass and steel, with employees in perfectly pressed suits moving with military precision. "Mr. Petrovisk," Victor appeared at Alexander's elbow as they stepped out of the elevator on the 47th floor. "Your 8 a.m. is here, and Ms. Rodriguez from PR needs to speak with you urgently about the situation. Cancel the 8 a.m. and tell Carmen I'll handle the PR situation myself." Victor glanced nervously at Marina. "Sir, perhaps we should discuss—" "Victor." Alexander's voice dropped to a temperature that could freeze champagne. "I said I'll handle it." Marina watched this exchange with growing unease. She'd seen enough workplace dynamics to recognize when someone was walking on eggshells around their boss. Alexander's office was a monument to success and isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Central Park, but the space felt cold, clinical. No personal photos, no warm colors, nothing that suggested a human being actually worked here. "Nice place," Marina said, setting her purse down on his glass desk. "Very sterile. I prefer efficient. Same thing, really." She turned to face him. "Look, Mr. Petrovisk." Alexander. Alexander. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not looking for anything from you. I don't want money, I don't want fame, and I definitely don't want to be your girlfriend." "Good," he said, moving to pour himself coffee from an elaborate machine. "Because I'm not offering any of those things." Marina felt oddly stung by his bluntness. "Then what do you want?" "I want you to be my girlfriend." "I just said I don't want—" "Wait, what?" Alexander turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Not actually, publicly. I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend for the next 3 months." Marina sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. "Are you insane?" "Completely sane, and completely serious." He sat down across from her, placing a contract on the desk between them. "My board of directors has been pressuring me to settle down. They think it would be good for the company's image, make me seem more relatable. And instead of actually dating someone, you want to hire a fake girlfriend? I don't have time for actual relationships. They're messy, complicated, and ultimately disappointing." "Wow," Marina said, flipping through the contract. "You really know how to charm a girl." "I'm not trying to charm you. I'm trying to offer you a mutually beneficial arrangement." Marina read the compensation clause and nearly choked. This is more money than I make in 2 years. 3 months, Miss Santos. A few public appearances, some carefully orchestrated social media posts, and you'll have enough money to pursue whatever journalistic dreams you have without worrying about rent. And what do you get out of this? A girlfriend who won't try to change me, won't demand emotional intimacy, and won't be devastated when it's over. Marina stared at him across the desk. There was something almost vulnerable in the way he said it, despite his matter-of-fact tone. "You really don't believe in love, do you?" "I believe in results. Love is just brain chemistry designed to ensure species survival." "That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard." "It's realistic." Marina stood up, pacing to the window. The morning sun was hitting the park, and she could see couples jogging together, families feeding ducks, people living actual lives. "What if I say no?" "Then you walk away, and we both pretend last night never happened." "And if I say yes?" "Then you become the luckiest woman in New York. At least that's what everyone will think." Marina turned back to him. "There's something you're not telling me." Alexander's mask slipped for just a moment, and she saw something raw and carefully hidden in his eyes. "There's a lot I'm not telling you." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that my father is dying, and he's made it clear that the only way I'll inherit control of the company is if I prove I can maintain a stable relationship." Marina's expression softened. I'm sorry about your father. Don't be. He's been using emotional manipulation to control me my entire life. This is just his latest move. And you're going to let him win? I'm going to beat him at his own game. Alexander stood up, straightening his tie. So, Miss Santos, do we have a deal? Marina looked at the contract, then at Alexander, then back at the contract. 3 months. Enough money to change her life. And something in those gray-green eyes that made her think maybe, just maybe, she could help him remember what it felt like to be human. I have conditions, she said finally. I'm listening. First, I maintain my journalistic integrity. I won't write puff pieces about you or your company. Agreed. Second, no one can know this is fake. Not even our families. Especially not our families. Third, Marina took a deep breath. If at any point this starts to feel too real, we walk away. No questions asked. Alexander extended his hand. Deal. As their hands touched, Marina felt that same electric spark from the night before. From the way Alexander's pupils dilated slightly, she knew he felt it too. One more thing, she said, not letting go of his hand. What happens if we actually start to like each other? Alexander's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we'll have bigger problems than your fake girlfriend contract. 1 week later, Le Bernardin Restaurant, Manhattan. Marina stared at her reflection in the ladies' room mirror of one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, wondering how her life had become so surreal in just 7 days. The emerald green dress Alexander's stylist had selected fit her perfectly, but she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. You can do this, she whispered to herself. It's just dinner, with cameras, and the most intimidating man you've ever met. Who's paying you to pretend to love him? Her phone buzzed with a text from Camilla. Girl, you're trending on Twitter again. Power couple is the #1 hashtag. What did you do to that man? What indeed? Over the past week, Alexander had been surprisingly present. Fresh flowers delivered to her apartment every morning, thoughtful texts asking about her day, and yesterday he'd somehow arranged for her favorite coffee shop to stay open late when she was working on a deadline. It's all for show, she reminded herself. He's building a narrative. But then why did her stomach flutter every time his name appeared on her phone? Marina returned to their corner table, where Alexander was checking his phone with that familiar focused intensity. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression shifted. Softer, warmer, like he was genuinely happy to see her. Everything all right? He asked, standing to pull out her chair. Just giving myself a pep talk. Nervous about the photographers? Marina glanced toward the restaurant's windows, where she could see camera flashes going off despite the tinted glass. Among other things. Alexander followed her gaze, his jaw tightening slightly. We can leave if you're uncomfortable. No, it's fine. This is what we signed up for, right? Right. But he didn't sound entirely convinced either. Their waiter appeared with practiced discretion, and Alexander ordered wine without consulting her, a 2015 Burgundy that probably cost more than her laptop. You know, Marina said, unfolding her napkin, most fake boyfriends would at least pretend to ask their fake girlfriend's preferences. Most fake girlfriends wouldn't call out their fake boyfriends in public. Touché. Marina smiled despite herself. Though technically we're not in public. This is a very exclusive, very private public. The most dangerous kind. As if summoned by his words, a familiar blonde figure glided past their table. Veronica Ashworth Chen, the socialite from the charity gala, now dressed in head-to-toe designer everything and wearing a smile that could cut glass. Alexander, darling, she cooed, air-kissing near his cheeks. And Marina, wasn't it? How unexpected to see you here. Veronica, Alexander's voice could have frozen the wine. How lovely. I simply had to stop by. Everyone's talking about you two. Such a romantic story. Love at first sight at a charity gala. Though I have to say the kiss was rather aggressive. Marina felt her cheeks burn. But before she could respond, Alexander's hand covered hers on the table. "I prefer passionate," he said, his thumb tracing across her knuckles. "Marina doesn't do anything halfway." The casual touch sent electricity up Marina's arm, and she had to remind herself it was all performance. "How refreshing." Veronica's smile grew sharper. "Well, I won't keep you lovebirds. Though, Alexander, darling, your father called me yesterday. He's so pleased about your development." Alexander's hand stiffened on Marina's. "My father discusses my personal life with you. Oh, you know how worried he's been about you. All work and no play. He's just thrilled you finally found someone who can handle you." Marina squeezed Alexander's hand, feeling the tension radiating from him. "Actually, I find Alexander very easy to handle. It's all about knowing which buttons to push." She looked directly at Alexander as she said it, and was rewarded with something that might have been genuine amusement in his eyes. "Indeed," Veronica said, clearly missing the undercurrent. "Well, enjoy your dinner. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of you, Marina." As she glided away, Alexander's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Friend of yours?" Marina asked. "Family friend. The kind you inherit and can never get rid of. Ah, like a genetic disease, but with better jewelry." Alexander laughed, an actual, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. Several heads turned at nearby tables, as if they'd never heard the sound before. "Did I say something funny?" Marina asked. "You have a very unique way of seeing the world. Is that CEO speak for weird?" "It's Alexander speak for refreshing." Their appetizers arrived, and Marina watched Alexander's precise way of eating. Every movement controlled, efficient, like he'd been trained to turn even a meal into a business meeting. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Not because it was good for business or expected of you, but just because it made you happy?" Alexander paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "That's a very personal question for a fake relationship." "Maybe, but I'm curious. You're paying me to pretend to care about you. The least you can do is give me something real to work with." He set down his fork, considering. "I bought a motorcycle last year, a Ducati Panigale V4. It serves no practical purpose, costs a fortune to maintain, and my insurance company thinks I'm insane. Do you ride it? Every Sunday morning at 6 a.m. I take the highway up to Bear Mountain, and for about 3 hours I'm not a CEO or an heir or anyone's expectation. I'm just me." Marina felt something shift in her chest. "That's not what I expected you to say." "What did you expect?" "Something about acquiring a rare wine or commissioning a piece of art. Rich guy stuff." Disappointed. Intrigued. Marina leaned forward. "Take me with you sometime." Alexander's eyes widened slightly. "On the motorcycle? Why not? Unless you think your fake girlfriend can't handle it." "It's not about handling it, it's—" He paused and she could see him wrestling with something. "That's my escape, my one space that's just mine. And you don't share escapes." "I don't share anything." The honesty in his voice caught Marina off guard. "That sounds lonely." "Lonely is safe." "Safe is overrated." They stared at each other across the table, and Marina felt like they were having an entirely different conversation than the one they were speaking out loud. "Miss Santos," Alexander said finally, "you're going to be trouble for me, aren't you?" "Mr. Petrovisk," Marina replied, raising her wineglass, "I'm going to be the best trouble you've ever had." As they clinked glasses, she noticed Alexander's hand was shaking almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, the mask slipped completely, and she saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes, like a man who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something he couldn't simply buy. "Marina," he said quietly, "what if this gets complicated? Then we'll figure it out as we go. I don't like uncertainty." "I know, but maybe that's exactly what you need." Outside, the camera flashes continued, capturing what the world would see as a perfect romantic dinner between New York's newest power couple. But inside the restaurant, something much more dangerous was happening, Two people who were supposed to be pretending to fall in love were discovering that the hardest person to lie to was themselves. 2 weeks later, Petrovisk Estate, the Hamptons Marina, had seen wealth before, but nothing had prepared her for the Petrovisk family estate. The sprawling mansion sat on 50 acres of perfectly manicured lawns that rolled down to a private beach, where a yacht that could house a small village bobbed gently at anchor. As their car wound up the circular driveway, she counted at least 3 guest houses, a tennis court, and what appeared to be a stable. "Feeling intimidated yet?" Alexander asked, noticing her wide-eyed stare through the window. "Should I be?" "Probably. My father designed this place specifically to make people feel small." The car stopped in front of marble steps that led to doors tall enough for giants. A butler in formal attire appeared immediately, followed by a woman in her 50s wearing pearls and the expression that could have been carved from ice. "Alexander, darling," the woman said, offering her cheek for a kiss. "And this must be the famous Marina." "Mother." Alexander's voice carried the same warmth one might use to discuss tax audits. "Marina, this is my mother, Catherine Petrovisk." Catherine's handshake was firm, calculating. "Miss Santos, you've certainly caused quite a stir. Mrs. Petrovisk, your home is breathtaking." "Thank you. Alexander tells me you're a journalist. How contemporary." Marina felt the subtle dig but smiled sweetly. "I prefer to think of it as old-fashioned. Someone has to ask the uncomfortable questions." Alexander coughed, but Marina caught what might have been approval in his eyes. "Indeed," Catherine said. "Well, come. Your father is waiting in the study, Alexander. He's particularly eager to meet your girlfriend." As they walked through halls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, Alexander leaned close to Marina's ear. "Fair warning, my father is going to try to dissect you like a lab specimen. And your mother already has." The study was a monument to masculine authority. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and the overwhelming scent of aged whiskey and old money. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat a man who was clearly Alexander 30 years in the future, if Alexander aged with the hardness of granite rather than wine. "Father," Alexander said, his posture becoming even more rigid. "This is Marina Santos." Dmitri Petrovisk stood slowly, his movements careful but commanding. Despite his illness, he radiated power like heat from a forge. His handshake was surprisingly strong, his gray eyes, so like Alexander's, sharp and assessing. "Miss Santos, so you're the woman who finally captured my son's attention." "I'm not sure captured is the right word, Mr. Petrovisk. It was more like a mutual collision." Dmitri's laugh was dry as autumn leaves. "Honest, I like that. Sit, both of you. We have much to discuss." Marina perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than her car, while Alexander remained standing behind her, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by his father. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Santos. Alexander has been surprisingly secretive about your background." "There's not much mystery, sir. I'm a freelance journalist from Brooklyn. I write about social issues, occasionally embarrass powerful people by asking them direct questions, and I once got arrested protesting outside a factory that was dumping chemicals in the Hudson River." "Arrested?" Catherine's voice carried a note of horror from where she'd positioned herself by the window. "Charges were dropped," Marina said cheerfully. "Turns out the factory was actually breaking federal law. Funny how that works." Dmitri leaned back in his chair, studying her with new interest. "And what do you think of my son's business practices?" Marina felt Alexander tense behind her. This was clearly a test, but she wasn't sure of what. "I think Alexander is brilliant at what he does, but I also think he uses his work to avoid dealing with more complicated aspects of life." The silence in the room was deafening. Catherine's pearls practically rattled with indignation, while Dmitri's eyebrows rose to his hairline. "Alexander," Dmitri said slowly, "leave us alone for a moment. Father, go check on the quarterly reports Victor brought. I want to speak with Miss Santos privately." Alexander hesitated. his hand briefly touching Marina's shoulder, a gesture of support that felt entirely too real for their fake relationship. "It's okay," Marina said, looking up at him. "I can handle your father." Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, concern, admiration, before he nodded curtly and left the room. "Well," Dmitri said once the door closed, "you certainly don't lack courage." "Is that what this is about? Courage?" "Partly." Dmitri poured himself a glass of whiskey from a crystal decanter. "Tell me, Miss Santos, what do you see when you look at my son?" Marina considered the question carefully. "I see someone who's forgotten how to trust anyone, including himself. I see someone who's built walls so high he can't remember what the view was like before he built them. And you think you can change him? I think he can change himself if he decides he wants to." Dmitri nodded slowly. "My son has been engaged twice. Did you know that?" Marina's stomach dropped. "No, he didn't mention that. The first time, he was 25. Elizabeth Thornton, old New York family. Perfect on paper. She broke it off after 6 months, said dating him was like being in love with a beautiful statue. And the second, Natasha Volkov, daughter of a Russian oil magnate. Alexander proposed after a year of what I'm told was a very practical courtship. She said yes, then disappeared 3 weeks later with his best friend from college." Marina felt something twist in her chest that might have been jealousy, which was ridiculous considering their arrangement. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm dying, Miss Santos. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 6 months, maybe less." Dimitri's voice was matter of fact, but Marina caught the slight tremor in his hands as he lifted his glass. "And my son is going to inherit one of the largest privately held companies in America. But more than that, he's going to be alone. Completely, utterly alone. Mr. Petrovisk, I know what you are to him," Dmitri continued, "or rather what he thinks you are. A business arrangement, a solution to pressure from the board of directors." Marina's blood chilled. "You know about the contract? I know my son. I know how his mind works. Emotional problem? Find a logical solution. Heart getting involved? Contain it with legal documents and financial incentives. Then why are you telling me this?" Dmitri leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "Because in the 42 years I've known Alexander, I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you when he thought you were in danger just now. And more importantly, I've never seen him allow anyone to speak to me the way you just did without immediately ending the relationship. Maybe he's just being polite. Alexander is never polite at the expense of control. Never." Dmitri finished his whiskey. "Whatever you're doing to him, Miss Santos, keep doing it. Because for the first time since he was 12 years old, my son is acting like a human being instead of a machine." Before Marina could respond, the door opened, and Alexander returned, Victor at his side carrying a thick folder. "Father, the board meeting has been moved to Wednesday," Alexander said, but his eyes were on Marina. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine," Dmitri said. "Miss Santos and I were just getting acquainted. I like her, Alexander. She has spine." "Yes," Alexander said quietly. "She does." The rest of the visit passed in a blur of carefully orchestrated family dinner conversation, but Marina couldn't shake what Dmitri had told her. As they drove back to the city, Alexander was unusually quiet. "Your father is dying," Marina said finally. Alexander's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "He told you. Why didn't you?" "Because it wasn't relevant to our arrangement." "Wasn't relevant?" Marina twisted in her seat to face him. "Alexander, your father is dying, and he's using your inheritance to manipulate you into a relationship. How is that not relevant?" "Because I'm going to beat him at his own game regardless. By pretending to love me? By proving I can maintain a stable relationship long enough to satisfy the board's requirements." Marina stared at his profile, noting the rigid set of his jaw, the white knuckles gripping the wheel. "What if you didn't have to pretend? What do you mean? What if you could actually have a real relationship? What if someone could actually care about you without wanting to change you or use you? Alexander was quiet for so long Marina thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Then I'd probably find a way to ruin it. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but when they reached Marina's building, Alexander didn't immediately drive away. "Marina," he said as she opened the car door. "Yes? Tomorrow is Sunday. I'm aware. I leave for Bear Mountain at 6 a.m. Marina's heart skipped. Are you inviting me? I'm asking if you still want to come." "Why?" Alexander finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. "Because maybe it's time I learned how to share my escape with someone else." The next morning, Marina stood outside her building at 5:50 a.m., wearing jeans and a leather jacket she'd borrowed from Camilla, wondering if she'd lost her mind. The sound of a motorcycle engine rumbling down her street answered that question definitively. Alexander pulled up on a machine that looked like it had been designed by angels and built by demons. He was wearing black leather and a helmet, and Marina had to remind herself to breathe. "You came," he said, pulling off his helmet. "I said I would. I wasn't sure you meant it. I don't say things I don't mean." He handed her a helmet and helped her onto the bike behind him. "Hold on tight," he said, "and don't let go." As they roared out of Brooklyn and onto the highway, Marina wrapped her arms around Alexander's waist and pressed her face against his back. She could feel his heartbeat through the leather, steady and strong. The city blurred past them as they climbed toward the mountains, and for the first time since she'd met him, she felt Alexander truly relax. At Bear Mountain, they sat on a rocky outcropping overlooking the Hudson Valley, sharing coffee from a thermos and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. "This is beautiful," Marina said. "It's the only place I can think clearly." "What do you think about up here?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "Lately, you." Marina turned to look at him. "Alexander, I know. This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to matter. But I do matter. Yes, and that terrifies me more than anything my father or the board could ever do." Marina reached for his hand, and this time when their fingers intertwined, it had nothing to do with cameras or contracts or public perception. "What if we stopped pretending?" she said softly. "What if we didn't have to fake this anymore?" Alexander looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. "What if I told you I've been falling for you since the moment you walked out of that elevator after kissing me? I'd say you're 3 weeks behind me." When he kissed her this time, there were no cameras, no audiences, no business purposes. There was just Alexander and Marina, and the possibility that sometimes the most unexpected collisions create the most beautiful destinations. But neither of them noticed the telephoto lens hidden in the trees below, capturing every intimate moment for tomorrow's headlines. Monday morning, Petrovisk Industries headquarters. Marina woke up Monday morning with the taste of mountain air still on her lips, and the memory of Alexander's hands in her hair. For exactly 37 seconds, she allowed herself to float in the blissful bubble of their breakthrough at Bear Mountain. Then her phone started ringing. "Mari, where are you?" Camilla's voice was tight with panic. "Home, why? What time is it?" "It's 7 a.m. and you need to get to a newsstand now." Something cold settled in Marina's stomach. "Cam, what's wrong?" "Just get to a newsstand, and maybe call Alexander first." Marina threw on clothes and rushed to the corner bodega, her heart hammering. Mr. Patel, the owner, gave her a sympathetic look as she approached the magazine rack. "I'm sorry, Miss Marina," he said softly. The headline hit her like a physical blow. "Fake love for real money, the Petrovisk contract scandal." Below it, a photo of her and Alexander from Bear Mountain. Intimate, unguarded, his forehead pressed against hers as she laughed at something he'd said. But the image that made her blood turn to ice was the smaller photo in the corner, a grainy shot of what looked like legal documents. With shaking hands, she bought 3 different tabloids. Each one told the same story with varying degrees of salacious detail. Someone had leaked their contract. Someone had proof that their entire relationship was a business arrangement. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. My office. Now. The ride to Manhattan felt like traveling through a gauntlet. News vans lined the street outside Petrovisk Industries, and Marina could see reporters with cameras waiting like vultures. She used the underground parking garage entrance, but even there, a photographer managed to get a shot of her emerging from the elevator, looking pale and shaken. Alexander's office felt like a war room. Victor was pacing, barking orders into his phone in rapid Russian. Carmen Rodriguez, the head of PR, was typing furiously on her laptop while simultaneously conducting what sounded like a very heated conversation with someone from the New York Times. Alexander stood at his wall of windows, staring down at the circus below. He was perfectly dressed as always, but Marina could see the tension in the rigid line of his shoulders. How bad is it? She asked. Bad, Carmen said without looking up. The story broke at 5 a.m. across 6 major outlets simultaneously. Someone didn't just leak this, they orchestrated a coordinated attack. Who would have access to the contract? Marina asked. Very few people, Victor said, ending his call. The lawyers who drafted it, Alexander, myself, and... Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. And whoever might have had access to your father's private files. The silence in the room was deafening. Alexander turned slowly from the window, and Marina had never seen him look so coldly furious. My father leaked this. We don't know that for certain, Victor said carefully. Don't we? Alexander's laugh was sharp as broken glass. This has his fingerprints all over it. The timing, the coordination, the specific documents chosen. He wants me to fail. Marina felt like she was watching a man have his heart carved out in real time. Alexander. The board is meeting in an emergency session this afternoon, Carmen interrupted. They're questioning whether you're fit to lead the company, if you can't even maintain an authentic personal relationship. Perfect, Alexander said bitterly. Exactly what he wanted. Marina's phone started buzzing incessantly. Text after text, call after call. She glanced at the screen and saw messages from every major news outlet, several talk shows, and at least 3 book publishers. Miss Santos, Carmen said, I need to ask, are you planning to speak to the media about this? No, of course not. Because I have to warn you, there are already rumors that you're shopping around for a tell-all interview. Your phone has been traced to several major network buildings in the past hour. Marina stared at her. My phone has been what now? GPS tracking. Standard practice when someone becomes a person of interest. I haven't left my apartment except to come here. Alexander finally looked at her, and the suspicion in his eyes was like a knife to the chest. Haven't you? Are you serious right now? Marina's voice rose. You think I leaked our contract? Someone did. Someone with access to confidential information and a lot to gain from destroying my reputation. What exactly would I gain from this? Fame, money, a book deal. Your 15 minutes extended to a full hour. Marina felt like he'd slapped her. After everything we shared yesterday, you really think I'm capable of this? I don't know what you're capable of. That's the problem. The hurt in his voice was almost worse than the accusation. Marina realized that for all his talk of trust issues, Alexander had actually started to trust her, and now he felt betrayed all over again. The GPS tracking, Victor said quietly, consulting his tablet. It shows Miss Santos's phone pinging off towers near the Manhattan District Attorney's office this morning. Everyone turned to stare at Marina. That's impossible. I was at home until I came here. Unless, Carmen said slowly, someone cloned your phone. The room went silent again. Alexander's expression shifted from suspicion to something much more dangerous. Victor, he said quietly, get me everything you can on who had access to Marina's phone data. I want to know everyone who's been tracking her, everyone who's been listening to her calls, everyone who's been reading her texts. Sir, that level of surveillance would require significant resources and... Just do it. As Victor hurried out, Carmen gathered her things. I need to prepare for the board meeting. Alexander, whatever you're going to do about this situation, you need to decide fast. The story is spreading exponentially. After Carmen left, Marina and Alexander stood alone in his office, the weight of the morning's revelations settling between them like a wall. "I'm sorry," Alexander said finally. "I should have known you wouldn't." "But you didn't know," Marina interrupted. "That's the problem, isn't it? After all this time, all the things we've shared, your first instinct was still to assume I betrayed you." "Marina." "No, I get it, I really do. You've been hurt before, and trusting people is basically impossible for you. But I thought maybe we'd gotten past that." Alexander ran his hands through his hair, destroying his perfect styling. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be in a relationship where I'm not constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's exactly why your father leaked this, isn't it?" Marina said, pieces clicking into place. "He knew that the moment we were exposed, you'd retreat behind your walls again. He knew you'd push me away rather than fight for us." "You think this is about us?" "Marina, this is about my entire future. The board could remove me as CEO over this. And would that be so terrible?" Alexander stared at her like she'd suggested he light himself on fire. "Are you insane? This company is everything I've worked for my entire life." "No, it's everything you've been told you should want your entire life. There's a difference. I can't believe we're having this conversation right now. When else are we going to have it? When you're busy being the perfect CEO who never takes risks or lets anyone get close enough to matter? That's not fair. It's completely fair. You're already pulling away from me, and we haven't even been exposed for 12 hours yet." Before Alexander could respond, Victor burst back into the office, his face pale. "Sir, we have a much bigger problem." "Bigger than a corporate scandal and a board revolt?" "Yes." Victor turned his tablet around to show them a live news feed. Someone just released the security footage from the charity gala, all of it. On the screen, Marina watched herself kiss Alexander for what felt like the 1,000th time. But this footage was different. It showed the entire sequence of events, including the confrontation with the socialites, Alexander's approach, and most damaging of all, the moment immediately after the kiss when Alexander's expression clearly showed he was as surprised as everyone else. "The narrative is changing," Victor continued. "Instead of billionaire hires fake girlfriend, it's becoming innocent woman manipulates grieving billionaire. And they're painting you as a gold digger who orchestrated everything, Miss Santos." Marina sank into a chair, the full scope of the attack becoming clear. "This isn't just about destroying Alexander's reputation. Someone wants to destroy mine too." "But who would benefit from that?" Alexander asked. "Someone who wants to make sure we both lose," Marina said quietly. "Someone who benefits from keeping Alexander isolated and alone." Victor's phone rang, and he answered with a sharp "Da?" His face grew even paler as he listened. "Sir," he said, hanging up, "your mother is downstairs. She's requesting an immediate meeting. My mother never comes to the office. She does today." Catherine Petrovisk entered the office like a queen surveying a battlefield. She was perfectly coiffed, perfectly dressed, and perfectly composed. Everything Alexander always tried to be, and Marina had never cared about being. "Alexander, darling," she said, kissing his cheek. "Miss Santos." The acknowledgement was ice cold. "Mother, if you're here to gloat, I'm here because your father is having chest pains and has been asking for you." Alexander went rigid. "How bad?" "Bad enough that the doctors want to move him to intensive care, but he's refusing to go until he speaks with you both." Marina felt the blood drain from her face. "Both of us?" "He specifically requested Miss Santos's presence. Something about unfinished business." Alexander was already reaching for his jacket. "We need to go, now." "Alexander," Marina said quietly, "maybe I should stay here. Deal with the media, let you handle your family." "No." His voice was firm. "We're in this together. Whatever my father has done, whatever game he's playing, we face it together." As they rushed toward the elevator, Marina caught Alexander's hand. "Are we? Together, I mean?" Alexander stopped, looking down at their intertwined fingers. Around them, the office buzzed with crisis energy, phones ringing, people shouting, the controlled chaos of a life imploding. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly. "I don't know how to trust you completely. I don't know how to stop waiting for you to leave, and I definitely don't know how to choose you over everything I've built." "You don't have to know how," Marina said. "You just have to want to try. And if I'm not brave enough, then you're going to have to find a way to become brave enough. Because I'm falling in love with you, Alexander Petrovsk. Not your money, not your company, not your perfect public image. You. The man who buys motorcycles because they make him feel free. The man who pretends to be made of ice but melts when someone shows him genuine kindness." Alexander's eyes searched her face like he was memorizing it. "If we do this, if we really try and it doesn't work, then we'll have tried. That's more than most people can say." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside together. As the floors counted down, Marina realized they weren't just descending to the parking garage. They were stepping into whatever came next, together or not at all. But first, they had to face Dmitry Petrovsk one more time. And Marina had a feeling that conversation was going to change everything. "Alexander," she said as they reached the garage, "there's something I need to tell you about my conversation with your father yesterday." "What about it?" "He knows about us, the real us. He's known all along that our feelings are real." Alexander stopped walking. "What?" "He leaked the contract to force us into this exact situation. He wanted to see if you'd choose the easy path, your company, your inheritance, your safe, controlled life, or if you'd choose the complicated, messy, beautiful path of actually being in love. You're saying this is all a test?" "I'm saying your father is dying and he wants to make sure that when he's gone, you won't be alone, even if it means burning down everything you think you want to get there." Alexander stared at her for a long moment, processing this revelation. Then unexpectedly, he started to laugh. "He's manipulating us even now. Yes, using his own death as emotional leverage. Yes, making us choose between love and security. Yes." Alexander cupped her face in his hands. "Then let's give him what he wants. Let's choose love and see what happens." As they drove toward the hospital, neither of them noticed the black sedan following 3 cars behind, or the photographer in the passenger seat capturing every moment of their reconciliation. The game was far from over. New York Presbyterian Hospital, private wing. The private hospital wing smelled of expensive disinfectant and whispered conversations. Marina had been in hospitals before, but never one where the waiting room had original artwork and fresh orchids, where the staff moved with the reverent quiet, reserved for royalty or the dying. The hallway stretched endlessly before them, lined with doors behind which other wealthy families faced their own private dramas, their own mortality, their own reckonings with truth. Dmitry Petrovsk lay propped against pristine white pillows, looking smaller than Marina remembered, but no less formidable. Machines beeped softly around him, monitoring a heart that had orchestrated one final elaborate manipulation, even as it prepared to stop beating. His skin had taken on the waxy pallor of the very ill, but his eyes remained sharp, calculating, missing nothing. "Ah," he said as they entered, his voice raspier than it had been at the estate, but still carrying that unmistakable authority. "My son and his beautiful accomplice. Come, sit. We have much to discuss, and, as you can see, time is not on our side." Alexander remained standing, his posture rigid with barely controlled anger. His hands were clenched at his sides, and Marina could see a muscle jumping in his jaw. "Was it worth it, father? Destroying everything I've built for your twisted social experiment? Everything you've built?" Dmitry's laugh turned into a cough that shook his entire frame. Catherine immediately moved to his side, offering water that he waved away with impatience. "Son, you haven't built anything. You've inherited a throne and sat on it. Perfectly, safely, alone. That's not building. That's existing. The board wants me removed. The stock price has dropped 12% since this morning. Our biggest clients are reconsidering their contracts. Henderson Industries pulled their merger proposal. The Shanghai deal is falling apart. Alexander's voice grew more strained with each revelation. 40 years of reputation, gone in a single news cycle. And yet here you are, Dmitri said softly, with the woman you love fighting for something that matters more than quarterly earnings reports or merger proposals or the approval of old men in expensive suits. Marina stepped forward, unable to remain silent. Mr. Petrovisk, people are getting hurt by this. Alexander's employees don't deserve to lose their jobs because of games you're playing. The company's reputation affects thousands of people. The company will survive, Dmitri interrupted, his gray eyes intense despite his weakened state. It survived my father's gambling addiction that nearly bankrupted us in 1953. It survived my grandfather's ill-advised involvement with financing the Russian Revolution. It survived my own youthful indiscretions, with both radical politics and inappropriate women in the 1970s. It will survive a fake relationship scandal. But will Alexander survive it? Marina asked quietly, moving to place a protective hand on his arm. Dmitri studied her for a long moment, and Marina saw something that might have been approval in his gaze. That, Miss Santos, depends entirely on what he chooses to do next, and whether he finally understands that some victories require the courage to lose everything first. A soft knock interrupted them, and Catherine entered with Victor, whose face was grim with fresh bad news. He carried a tablet and several manila folders, and Marina could see from his expression that the situation had deteriorated further. Alexander, Victor said immediately, setting down his materials. The board meeting has been moved up. They want to see you in an hour. An hour? Alexander's composure finally cracked, his voice rising. Victor, I need more time to prepare a response, to craft a strategy, to figure out damage control. There is no strategy, Dmitri said from his bed, his voice cutting through Alexander's panic like a blade. There's only choice. The choice between the life you've been living and the life you could have. Easy for you to say. You're not the one about to lose everything. Alexander began pacing, his movements sharp and agitated. You're not the one whose life's work is about to be stripped away by a board of directors who think personal happiness is a liability. Aren't I? Dmitri's voice carried a note of genuine sadness that stopped Alexander mid-pace. I'm about to lose my son, possibly forever, because I've spent 42 years teaching him that love is weakness and vulnerability is failure. Because I raised him to believe that a man's worth is measured in stock prices and acquisition deals rather than in his capacity to open his heart to another human being. Catherine moved to stand beside her husband's bed, her perfectly manicured hand finding his with a tenderness that surprised Marina. For the first time since Marina had met her, the older woman looked genuinely emotional, her usual mask of aristocratic composure slipping to reveal something raw and real underneath. Your father, she said to Alexander, her voice uncharacteristically soft, has been planning this for months, ever since the doctors gave him his prognosis. Ever since he realized he was running out of time to undo the damage he'd done to you. Planning what exactly? Alexander's voice was dangerous now, low and controlled in the way that meant he was barely containing his fury. Your freedom, Dmitri said simply. The board, the inheritance requirements, the pressure to marry. It was all designed to force you into exactly this situation. To put you in a position where you'd have to choose between the safe path and the path that might actually lead to happiness. Marina felt pieces clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. You wanted Alexander to find someone he cared about enough to risk everything for. I wanted him to discover that some things are worth more than shareholder value. That some victories require the courage to potentially lose everything you think you want in order to gain everything you actually need. Alexander sank into a chair, running his hands through his hair and completely destroying his perfect styling. So the whole thing was fake? The board's concerns, the marriage requirement, the pressure from investors? Oh, the marriage requirement is real, Dmitri said, his voice growing weaker but his eyes remaining sharp. As is the board's conservatism about your personal life, as are their concerns about succession planning and stability. But I may have encouraged their concerns about your bachelor status. You manipulated your own board of directors. I may have mentioned during several casual conversations over the past year that a man who couldn't maintain a personal relationship might lack the emotional intelligence required for modern corporate leadership. I may have shared some research about how family stability correlates with business performance. I may have planted seeds of doubt about your readiness to take over the family legacy. Victor cleared his throat nervously, consulting his tablet. Sir, there's more. We've traced the source of the leak, the breach of your confidential contract. Everyone turned to him, and Marina felt her stomach drop at his expression. It wasn't your father, Victor continued, looking directly at Alexander. The leak came from someone with access to Miss Santos's apartment building security system. Someone who's been monitoring her movements, her communications, her daily routine for weeks. Marina's blood chilled. Who has that kind of access? Someone with significant resources and technological capability. Someone with a personal vendetta and the patience to orchestrate a long-term surveillance operation. Alexander stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked Central Park. Natasha. Your ex-fiancé? Marina asked, though something in her gut already knew the answer. She always said she'd make me pay for embarrassing her. When I broke our engagement, she told me she'd destroy me the way I destroyed her reputation. I thought she meant socially, professionally. Nasty gossip, maybe some strategic social cuts. I never imagined. She's been watching Marina, Catherine said, understanding dawning in her voice. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Gathering intelligence, building a case, preparing for maximum damage. Victor nodded grimly, scrolling through his tablet. Miss Volkov returned to New York 3 weeks ago, just after your relationship with Miss Santos became public. She's been staying at the St. Regis under an assumed name, Anna Kozlova, but we have credit card records placing her near Miss Santos's building multiple times. She's also been frequenting coffee shops and restaurants in Marina's neighborhood, apparently gathering intelligence on her routine. The fake GPS data, Marina said, pieces falling into place. She cloned my phone to make it look like I was shopping the story around to different news outlets. It's more sophisticated than that, Victor continued, pulling up more files. She's been feeding carefully crafted information to the media for weeks, positioning herself as a concerned ex-lover, trying to protect Alexander from a manipulative gold digger. She's the unnamed source in at least 6 major stories about your relationship. She's been building a narrative that you're a calculated opportunist who targeted Alexander specifically for his wealth. Where is she now? Alexander's voice was dangerously quiet. The kind of controlled fury that Marina had learned meant he was at his most focused and dangerous. Downstairs, in the hospital lobby, apparently waiting to comfort you after your devastating betrayal. She's given 3 interviews in the past hour, each one painting herself as the woman who truly understands you, who tried to warn you about Marina's true nature. The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of Dmitri's monitors and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond their private wing. Well, Dmitri said finally, a trace of his old humor flickering in his eyes. This is unexpected, though it does add a certain dramatic flair to the proceedings. I couldn't have orchestrated it better myself. This isn't funny, Father. Alexander's voice was sharp with stress and exhaustion. No, but it is illuminating. You have a choice to make, Alexander. You can go downstairs, let Natasha comfort you, accept her version of events, return to your safe, predictable life. The board would approve. She's from an appropriate family, understands the corporate world, would never challenge you or demand emotional growth or ask you to risk anything meaningful. Or you can fight for Marina. Walk into that board meeting knowing you might lose everything you've worked for, but gaining something infinitely more valuable. You can choose the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of love over the sterile safety of a life, lived entirely within other people's expectations. Marina stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. No. Everyone looked at her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. No, she repeated, moving to the center of the room. I won't be the prize in some elaborate test of Alexander's character. I won't be the thing he has to choose over his career, and I won't be the reason he loses his inheritance or his company, or his life's work. Marina, Alexander started, but she held up a hand. I'm serious. This is insane. Your father is literally dying and using his last breaths to manipulate us into some grand romantic gesture that could destroy your life. Your psychotic ex-fiancé is downstairs spinning a web of lies to the media. The board of directors wants your head on a platter. And I'm supposed to stand here and let you sacrifice everything for me? But what if it doesn't destroy it? Alexander asked quietly, moving toward her. What if it saves it? What if this is exactly what I need to finally become the man I'm supposed to be, instead of the man I was trained to be? Marina looked at him. Really looked at him. The man standing before her was different from the controlled, isolated CEO she'd met at the charity gala. This Alexander was messy, uncertain, vulnerable. His hair was disheveled, his tie was askew, and there was something raw and desperate in his eyes that made her heart ache. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. The words came out fierce, certain, like a declaration of war against his own careful nature. Not because my father wants me to, not because it's good for my personal growth, not because you're teaching me to be more human. I love you because you're brave enough to stand up to socialites who think they own the world. Because you're funny enough to make me laugh when I haven't laughed in years. Because you see through all my carefully constructed walls to the person I actually am underneath all the corporate conditioning. Alexander, I'm saying I choose you. Company, inheritance, board approval, family legacy, none of it matters if I don't have you. None of it means anything if I'm just going to spend the rest of my life pretending to be someone I'm not, surrounded by people who don't actually know me or care about me beyond what I can do for them. But the board meeting, your career, everything you've worked for, can go straight to perdition. Alexander's smile was fierce, free, more genuine than any expression she'd seen from him. Let them remove me. I'll start my own company. I'll write freelance articles with you about corporate corruption and social justice. I'll teach business ethics at community college. I'll learn to fix motorcycles and open a garage. I don't care, as long as we're together. Dmitri began to applaud slowly from his hospital bed, his weak hands making barely any sound. Now that, he said, his voice filled with pride and satisfaction, is my son. That's the man I raised before I tried to turn him into a machine. Catherine wiped away tears she'd probably never admit to shedding. It's about time. I was beginning to think we'd broken you completely. Victor looked between them all like he'd stumbled into an alternate universe where everything he'd been trained to prioritize, stock prices, board approval, corporate stability, had suddenly become secondary to human emotion. Sir, he said carefully, what about Miss Volkov? What about the media circus? What about the board's reaction? What about her? Alexander pulled Marina into his arms, and she could feel his heart racing against her chest. Let her have whatever story she wants to tell. Let the media write whatever headlines they want. The truth is simpler than any of their narratives. I fell in love with an incredible woman who kissed me at a charity gala, and everything else is just noise. Even if it costs you everything you've spent your life building, Marina is everything. Alexander's voice was quiet but absolute. Everything else is just stuff I inherited or accumulated. Marina is something I chose, something I fought for, something I earned by becoming worthy of her. Marina felt her heart completely melt and reconstruct itself around this man who'd been so afraid of vulnerability that he'd hidden behind contracts and walls and corporate armor for years. Okay, she said softly, reaching up to straighten his crooked tie. Okay, but I have conditions. Anything. First, we're doing this as equals. No more contracts, no more arrangements, no more business deals disguised as relationships. If we're together because we choose each other every single day, not because it's convenient or profitable or expected. Agreed. Second, we face whatever comes next as a team. Board meetings, media circuses, vengeful ex-fiancés, family drama, corporate scandals. We handle it together. No more protecting me from your world or shutting me out when things get complicated. Agreed. Third, Marina grinned, some of her natural mischief returning. You're taking me on that motorcycle again soon, and this time I want to learn to drive it myself. Deal. Alexander kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Anything else? Just one more thing. Marina looked over at Dmitri, who was watching them with satisfaction and exhaustion warring in his eyes. We're going to visit your father every day he has left, not because he manipulated us into falling in love, but because family is complicated and messy, and worth fighting for even when they drive us absolutely insane with their scheming. Dimitri's smile was radiant, transforming his gaunt face. Miss Santos, you are going to be a formidable addition to this family. You might even be able to keep Alexander human. Mr. Petrovisk, I think you should know, I'm probably going to spend the next several years being furious with you for this elaborate scheme, even though it worked out. I wouldn't expect anything less. Fury means you care. Indifference would mean I'd failed completely. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Board meeting in 30 minutes. They want answers. The vultures are circling. What's your play? Time to go, he said, but he was smiling like a man heading into battle he was finally ready to fight. What are you going to tell them? Marina asked as they gathered their things. The truth. That I fell in love, that it's real, that I'm choosing my personal happiness over their comfort levels, and that any board who has a problem with their CEO being genuinely human can find themselves a new CEO. That's either very brave or very stupid. With you, I'm willing to risk either. As they prepared to leave Dimitri's room, Marina heard the older man call out weakly, Alexander? They turned back, and Marina saw something pass between father and son that transcended all the manipulation and games and corporate maneuvering. I'm proud of you, son, finally. For the first time in your adult life, you're making a choice based on what you want, rather than what you think you should want. Alexander's voice was thick when he replied, Thank you, Father, for everything, even the parts that made me want to murder you. Especially those parts. They were the most important. In the elevator descending to the main hospital lobby, Marina and Alexander stood hand in hand, preparing to face whatever media circus waited for them. The building around them hummed with the quiet efficiency of money and privilege, but Marina felt like they were descending into something much more real and dangerous than any corporate boardroom. You know, Marina said, watching the floor numbers count down, when I kissed you at that gala, I never imagined it would lead to corporate espionage and family deathbed revelations and vengeful ex-fiancés with surveillance equipment. When you kissed me at that gala, I never imagined I'd be willing to give up everything I thought I wanted for something I never knew I needed. And what's that? A future with you in it. A life where I get to wake up every morning and choose to be happy instead of just successful. The elevator doors opened to reveal a lobby that looked like a media war zone. Reporters with cameras and microphones, photographers with telephoto lenses, and in the center of it all, like a perfectly positioned spider in an elaborate web, Natasha Volkov. She was stunning, Marina had to admit. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a way that suggested both mourning and availability. She was surrounded by reporters, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief while speaking in low, concerned tones about Alexander's emotional state and her fears for his well-being. Well, Marina said, squeezing Alexander's hand, here we go. Together? Together. They stepped out of the elevator and into the chaos, flashbulbs exploding around them like small suns. The questions came immediately, a barrage of accusations and demands. Mr. Petrovisk, is it true your relationship was completely fabricated? Marina, how much were you paid to pretend to love him? Alexander, do you have any comment on Miss Volkov's allegations? But Alexander didn't stop, didn't hesitate, didn't even slow down. He walked straight through the crowd toward Natasha, Marina's hand firm in his expression calm and determined. Natasha, he said when they reached her, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos. I hear you have something to say about my relationship. She turned toward him with practiced grace, her expression perfectly calibrated to suggest wounded dignity and lingering affection. Alexander, darling, I've been so worried about you. This situation. It's not like you to be so publicly manipulated. You're right, Alexander said, and Marina felt a moment of panic before he continued. It's not like me to care more about what people think than about what I actually want. It's not like me to choose happiness over reputation. It's not like me to fall in love with someone brave enough to call me on my nonsense. Natasha's perfect composure flickered. Darling, you're not thinking clearly. This woman has obviously... This woman, Alexander interrupted, his voice carrying the authority that had made him one of the most feared negotiators in New York, is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And if you have a problem with that, you're welcome to discuss it with my lawyers while they're filing harassment charges against you for the illegal surveillance and corporate espionage you've been conducting. The crowd of reporters had gone silent, sensing that the story was shifting in real time. Corporate espionage, one of them called out. Miss Volkov has been conducting illegal surveillance of Marina for weeks, Alexander said, his voice clear and carrying. She cloned her phone, hacked her building's security system, and fed false information to the media in an attempt to destroy both our reputations, all of which, I'm told, constitutes several felonies. Natasha's face went white. You can't prove any of that. Actually, Victor appeared at Alexander's elbow with perfect timing. We can. We have digital forensics evidence, security footage, and financial records of your surveillance activities. The FBI Cybercrime Division is very interested in speaking with you. But we have a history, Natasha said desperately, her mask finally slipping completely. We were going to be married. I know you better than anyone. You knew the person I was pretending to be, Alexander said, and his voice was suddenly gentler, almost sad. But you never wanted to know the person I actually am. Marina does. That's the difference. He turned to the crowd of reporters, still holding Marina's hand. I have a statement, he said, and the lobby went completely silent. Marina Santos and I entered into what was initially a business arrangement. That arrangement became real feelings, which became love, which became the most important thing in my life. If that makes me unfit to run a corporation, then I'm clearly working for the wrong corporation. Are you resigning? Someone shouted. I'm choosing love over fear, Alexander replied. Everything else is just details. And with that, he led Marina through the crowd and out of the hospital, leaving behind a lobby full of reporters frantically rewriting their stories, and one very pale ex-fiancée who was suddenly very interested in speaking to her lawyer. 3 hours later, Petrovisk Industries boardroom. The boardroom on the 47th floor had never felt more intimidating. 12 of New York's most powerful business leaders sat around a mahogany table that could have doubled as a landing strip, their expressions ranging from disapproving to openly hostile. Alexander sat at the head of the table, Marina beside him, both of them still wearing the clothes they'd thrown on that morning before the world exploded around them. Across from them, the board members looked like they were attending a funeral, which Marina supposed they might be. The funeral of Alexander's career. Alexander, said Margaret Whitfield, the board's chair and a woman who'd been intimidating CEOs since before Alexander was born. I think we all know why we're here. I assume it's about my personal life and its imagined impact on the company's performance. Imagined? Harold Chen, the board's longest-serving member, leaned forward. Our stock price has dropped 15% since this morning. We've had 3 major clients express concerns about stability and leadership. The Singapore merger is on hold pending further review of our corporate governance. And all of that, Alexander said calmly, is based on the false narrative that my relationship with Marina was some kind of elaborate fraud designed to manipulate you and our investors. Wasn't it? Margaret's voice was sharp. It began as a business arrangement, Marina said, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the room. Alexander needed to satisfy your requirements for a stable personal life, and I needed financial security to pursue my journalism career. But business arrangements don't typically involve falling in love with each other. Miss Santos, Harold said, you're hardly an objective party in this discussion. You're right, I'm completely biased. I'm in love with your CEO, and I think he's brilliant at what he does, but I also think you're all letting your discomfort with emotional authenticity cloud your judgment about his professional capabilities. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Emotional authenticity? Alexander has spent his entire adult life being exactly what you wanted him to be, Marina continued, feeling Alexander's supportive presence beside her. Controlled, predictable, emotionally unavailable. And what has that gotten you? A CEO who makes safe choices, avoids risks, and treats innovation like a dirty word. Now see here, Harold started, but Marina was just getting started. I've seen the company's performance metrics for the past 5 years. Steady growth, yes, but minimal innovation, minimal. You've missed opportunities in sustainable technology, social impact investing, and emerging markets because your leadership was too risk-averse to pursue anything that might threaten quarterly projections. Those are complex business decisions, made by a man who was afraid to risk anything that might threaten his carefully controlled image. But the Alexander who fell in love with me, the one who's willing to risk his inheritance for something he believes in, that's the man who could actually transform this company into something revolutionary. The room was silent, the board members clearly not having expected a defense based on Alexander's emotional growth translating to business innovation. Furthermore, Alexander said, picking up Marina's thread, I'd like to propose some changes to the company's strategic direction. Changes that the old version of me would never have had the courage to suggest. He stood and moved to the presentation screen, pulling up a slideshow that Victor had apparently prepared. Sustainable technology partnerships with developing nations, a corporate social responsibility fund that dedicates 10% of profits to environmental and social justice causes, a whistleblower protection program for employees who report unethical practices, and a complete restructuring of our board composition to include members under 40 and at least 50% women. Margaret leaned back in her chair. You're proposing to revolutionize the entire company. I'm proposing to make it relevant for the next 50 years instead of the next 5 quarters. And you think your personal transformation qualifies you to lead such changes. I think my willingness to risk everything I've built for something I believe in proves I'm finally ready to be the leader this company needs instead of the leader you've been comfortable with. Harold shuffled his papers nervously. Alexander, these are radical proposals. The shareholders will love the long-term growth potential, Marina interrupted. I've done my research. Companies with strong environmental and social policies outperform traditional corporations by an average of 25% over 10-year periods. You've done research? Margaret's tone was skeptical. I'm a journalist. Research is what I do. Marina pulled out her own tablet. Would you like to see the data on how companies with emotionally intelligent leadership outperform those led by purely analytical CEOs? Or the statistics on innovation rates in corporations that embrace risk-taking versus those that prioritize stability above all else? For the next hour, Marina and Alexander presented a vision of Petrovisk Industries that was bold, innovative, and completely unlike anything the company had ever attempted. They talked about partnerships with environmental nonprofits, investments in clean technology startups, and a corporate culture that prioritized ethics and social impact alongside profit. When they finished, the room was silent for a long moment. This is, Margaret began, then stopped. Insane? Alexander suggested. Inspired, she finished, surprising everyone. Completely insane, but inspired. Harold leaned forward. You really think you can pull this off? I think the version of me who was afraid to risk anything would never even try, Alexander said. But the version of me who's learned to trust his instincts and surround himself with people who challenge him, that version might actually succeed. Margaret looked around the table at her fellow board members, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Alexander, she said finally, we're going to give you 6 months. 6 months to prove that your new approach can work without destroying everything we've built. And if it doesn't work, then we'll accept your resignation and find someone who's better suited to managing a traditional corporation. Alexander stood up, extending his hand to Margaret. Deal. As they shook hands, Marina felt something shift in the room. These people might not understand love or emotional growth, but they recognized vision and courage when they saw it. One more thing, Harold said as they prepared to leave. Miss Santos, Marina turned back. We'd like to offer you a position, head of corporate communications and social impact. If you're going to be part of Alexander's life, you might as well be part of the company's transformation. Marina looked at Alexander, who was grinning like a man who'd just discovered he could fly. I'll consider it, she said. But I have some conditions about editorial independence and investigative freedom. We wouldn't expect anything less, Margaret said dryly. 6 months later, Bear Mountain Marina adjusted her helmet and swung her leg over the back of Alexander's motorcycle. They'd made this trip every Sunday since that chaotic day at the hospital, and it had become their tradition, a way to start each week with perspective and each other. But today was different. Today, they were celebrating. Ready? Alexander asked, his voice muffled by his helmet. Always. They roared up the mountain highway, past the spot where they'd first admitted their feelings were real, past the place where a photographer had captured them in an unguarded moment that would change everything, past the overlook where they'd made the decision to fight for each other no matter what it cost. At the top, they sat on their usual outcropping, sharing coffee and the comfortable silence of two people who'd learned to trust each other completely. Any regrets? Marina asked as she did every week. About leaving Petrovisk Industries? About starting our own consulting firm? About my father's manipulation? Alexander considered, looking out over the Hudson Valley. Not one. The board had ultimately voted to remove Alexander as CEO after 3 months, not because his innovations weren't working, but because they decided they preferred the predictability of traditional leadership. Alexander's response had been to thank them for the severance package and immediately start his own company, specializing in sustainable business transformation. Marina had joined him, bringing her investigative skills and social justice background to help corporations navigate the complex world of ethical business practices. Their first client had been a renewable energy startup that needed help scaling their operations. Their 10th client had been Petrovisk Industries, now struggling under traditional leadership and desperately needing the innovative approaches they'd rejected. I have something for you, Alexander said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Marina's breath caught. Alexander, it's not what you think. I mean, it's not an engagement ring. We already did that 3 months ago when you proposed to me on this exact spot. Marina laughed, remembering that morning when she'd gotten so frustrated with his careful planning and risk assessment that she'd finally just asked him to marry her herself. It's a promise ring, he said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver band with a small inscription inside, Partners in Crime. A promise that whatever adventures we find ourselves in, fake relationships, real relationships, corporate scandals, family drama, vengeful ex-fiancés, board revolts, startup companies, we face them together. Marina slipped the ring onto her right hand, where it caught the morning light. Partners in crime, partners in everything. Dmitri had passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 months after their hospital confrontation, but not before seeing Alexander and Marina's engagement announcement in the Times. His funeral had been attended by half of Manhattan's elite and all of the employees from Alexander's new company. In his will, he'd left them the house in the Hamptons and a letter expressing his satisfaction with the outcome of his final manipulation. Natasha Volkov had been arrested for corporate espionage and sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service. She disappeared back to Moscow, but not before the media had thoroughly destroyed her reputation for orchestrating such an elaborate deception. As they prepared to head back down the mountain, Marina's phone buzzed with a text from their newest client. Major story breaking about corruption in pharmaceutical pricing. Want to investigate together while helping our client develop ethical alternatives? Marina showed the message to Alexander, who grinned. Ready for another adventure, partner? With you, always. They climbed back onto the motorcycle and roared down toward the city, toward whatever story was waiting to be uncovered, toward their small but growing company that was slowly proving that business could be both profitable and ethical. Toward a future full of possibilities they were brave enough to explore together. Behind them, the mountain stood eternal and unchanging, a witness to the transformation of two people who'd learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart to someone who might actually deserve it, and that sometimes the most beautiful victories are the ones that require you to lose everything you thought you wanted in order to gain everything you actually need. The end.